DoubleClick is probably the closest thing New York has to sort of a PayPal in the sense of sort of PayPal sort of often cited in Silicon Valley as a company that spawned, you know, Yelp and LinkedIn and YouTube and all these other successful companies. I think it's something like 60 companies, 660 companies in New York were started by former DoubleClick employees, including like Right Media, which was a huge success, and a bunch of others. Did you like? Is that something that you did you sort of try to foster? I mean, did you do something to sort of try to create? I mean, obviously one part of that was just that you were really successful, and
That helps.
Yeah, that helps a lot. But
Yeah.
then, in addition, I mean, there were other companies that were successful here that didn't spawn that kind of innovation. Like, is that something you deliberately fostered?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been obsessed with this because this is where my whole career has lied, which is coming up with innovations.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you? I'm just not a big believer. It never worked for me. Just sitting around and hoping the idea would come to my brain. Sometimes it does, but you can't bet on it. So I was always working on a systematized way of innovating.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote a book on this, actually, right?
Yes, after DoubleClick. So DoubleClick was sort of this incubator, an experiment where I could, implement some of these things. And it was just pretty simple methods that we use, and I use them today to find the best. I mean, it's just it's a way of what I find in most companies. The answers are already there. You can come up with a strategy very quickly. You can come up with a whole series of product ideas very quickly. You bring in a bunch of smart people. They already have it. So how do you get it out on the table? So how do you get the 100 different things that we could do, and then narrow it down to the three things that we're gonna do?
Mm-hmm. And do you think the first one? So you think when you have smart people, getting the 100 ideas is the easier part, and then narrowing it down is the harder part, or
both? Getting the 100 ideas out.
Okay, so that's just sort of the part of you have sort of a process, and that's
Yes.
the process. Sort of get the 100 ideas out, and then there's presumably like specific ways in which you narrow them then, or
Exactly. So I mean, it's real simple. Brainstorming is nothing new. So you brainstorm everything. There's no conversation, no anything, right? So you kind of keep the politics out of it. And then let's say you come up with 100 ideas, you divide it by 3, everyone gets 33 votes. And it forces people to make choices.
Mm-hmm.
One of the tough things, I'm sure you've seen this in startups, is that
you want to do everything or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Here's 100
So you're
things
forced
we
to make
could
trade-offs or something. Is that sort of the way you sort of try to structure
Exactly.
it? Okay.
And then what you find when people vote, there's very clear consensus.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually 3 or 4 things that emerge as you could spend months, and arguing about these things, and you already agree on it.
Mm-hmm. And you also teach entrepreneurship classes. And you said you were talking about this before, that there are like 10 questions used to diagnose entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess lecture
when
for...
I say diagnose, I mean to see if whether somebody would make a good entrepreneur.
Yeah, and it's a tough one, right? So there's all these entrepreneurship classes
Mm-hmm.
sprouting up all over the place, right? Every university's got one in the business school or in the engineering school, which I actually like it better in the engineering
Yeah, I
school.
think it's better there,
And then, so it's nature versus nurture, what makes a great entrepreneur and what doesn't. So I did a little bit of research and just anecdotal evidence I've seen of who's been successful and who's failed, and what the differences are. And
So what's the answer?
I'm not sure there is one, but I came up with a sort of 10
So
questions.
what are the 10 questions?
I'm not going to remember all of them, but I'll
Okay,
throw
what are
some
some
of
of
them
them?
out. One is just sort of you need to control.
Oh, so someone who's sort of a control freak.
Yeah.
So that's a sign of a good
They
entrepreneur.
like to control their destiny.
Okay.
The other one is, do you have sort of a disdain for authority?
Yeah.
If you told your boss to shove it, or a cop to go to hell,
Yeah. Have you done that?
Yeah, both.
Okay. Okay, go
I
ahead.
learned my lesson. It's not a good idea to tell cops to go to hell.
That's fine.
Bad idea. And then there's the, is there a charisma? And I mean, charisma can be seen as sort of very negative, as sort of a, used car
Superficial or
salesman.
something,
But
yeah.
I mean, do you really believe, do you have that passion in what you're doing?
Yeah. That can sort of
Emanates.
and then inspires people.
Yeah. We were talking about Dwight Merriman, earlier. I mean, Dwight's one of the greatest engineers I know.
He, by the way, is now, for people that don't know, the co-founder of 10gen, which makes MongoDB, which
Yep.
is it's increasingly popular database.
Not the most talkative guy in the world, but extremely charismatic, because he just, when he does talk, he talks of things that he's very passionate about and what he knows.
Mm-hmm.
And he's he's generally right.
Mm-hmm. And what are the other? Do you remember any of the 10 things?
Definitely a sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you take a look at, a lot of the guys that did very, very well, they dropped out of school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not, you always hear, I'm thinking about after I go to grad school, I'm going to do, it's like,
Yeah.
or I'm going to wait till this, I'm going to wait till that. You do it.
I found that I often get like emails from people that are like, I'm thinking about starting a company and this and that. And I find that if someone's been out of school for like 6 years and working at big companies, they're never gonna start a company.
They got a wife, they got mortgage, they got all that stuff. The other one is also just you probably see this all the time too. I got an idea.
Yeah.
An idea. You don't have 1,000 ideas.
Yeah.
It's really. Are you just constantly innovating? Do you look at things in life and say, that's stupid the way that thing's done? I could do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a dishwasher in a Chinese restaurant. It doesn't get much. That's a tough job.
Yeah.
And it was so boring. But I would always sit there and focus on how could I be more efficient? How could I do less work?
Mm-hmm. Did you find ways to make it more efficient?
Oh yeah. I was a good dishwasher.
Okay.
And then my goal in life was to never do dishes again.
Okay.
Which my wife Nancy can attest. That
You've accomplished that goal. That's good to see.